And for more analysis, we're joined from Moscow by Mr. Vincent Ligorio, head of the geopolitical department at Analytica for Intelligence think tank, and from Kiev by Mr. Ivan Us, advisor at Ukraine National Center. Welcome, gentlemen, to Q News. Now, Professor Ligorio, Russian officials have intensified, or rather insisted, any final agreement must reflect, I quote and unquote, spirit and letter of the Trump-Putin-Alaska summit. So from Moscow's viewpoint, what are the essential tenets of that summit that cannot be compromised and why?
Well, good evening, first of all. I think that the main framework of the meeting is the restoring of the relationship between US and Russia, and that is the pivot and the key point for this, let me say, agreement that they are trying to make. We have to consider that the most important thing from Trump perspective would be not achieve the peace, but achieve a business agreement with Russia. So the framework is that one. Trump is not a politician. Trump is not a diplomat. So the relationship that Trump is trying to build up with Moscow is simply a business one, and Trump sees a space, a room for such an opportunity. And of course, Russia is trying to use the purchase power that it has. And it gained during the Alaska, the so-called Alaska summit.
Professor Ligorio, allow me to ask you as well. The U.S. and Ukraine agreed a revised 28-point framework, and Zelensky said that he was ready to advance a U.S.-backed framework and discuss disputed points with Trump. How does Russia evaluate this revised plan?
Well, as far as we know, and as far as my analysis and my team analysis is working on, this 28 points agreement is only the base of the agreement. So we will have a room to move, let me say, from that agreement. So these are the pillars for the future peace agreement, yeah, and for the negotiation. So Russia is not very strict on its points. Russia is strict, for example, and responding negatively to the counter agreement, and for example, the 19 points that European Union is trying to promote, yeah, with to Kiev and to Washington. Yes. But Russia will not be strict on each point. So that is the base, that is the framework around which will be built a potential, okay? We cannot speak like as a something that will occur for sure, but a potential peace agreement.
Yes. Mr. Us, now in Kiev, Zelensky publicly committed to moving ahead with the US-backed plan and to discussing sensitive points with Trump. Which red lines is Ukraine unlikely to compromise on territory, military, politically?
Greetings to you, Hala. Greetings to Q News audience. Of course, greetings to the guest. Thank you for the invitation. You know, Hala, actually for Ukraine, there are several red lines. First of all, we don't want to recognize any of Ukrainian territory annexed by Russia since 2014. Secondly, Ukraine should not limit its army. You know, it's a local thing. When someone said to you that you should decrease quantity of your soldiers, Ukraine should determine what army we need. Third, Ukraine, of course, don't want to see items at this plan, or some parts of this plan, that say about total amnesty. You know, a lot of crimes committed by Russians for this practically 4 years of full-scale war. Yesterday night, the Russian drone attacked the residential building situated in front of my, actually, residential building where I'm living. So that's why I'm practically turned into a victim of this war directly due to Russian hit. That's why we are not ready to say that we can forget about that. Yes. And of course, as for future of Ukraine in NATO, I think NATO and Ukraine should determine that, but it should be not part of some actually deals. That's the main points, and let alone the economic part closer to me. I don't think that any sanctions against Russia should be eliminated immediately after start of this process. I think that Russia should compensate to Ukraine all damage that they created. It's not only a criminal responsibility for people who do that, but it's actually economical and financial compensation. More than $500 billion. It's a damage committed by Russia. So that's Ukrainian red lines. So
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Us, of course, we're wishing you safety, but stay safe. Given that the draft U.S. plan reportedly included limits on Ukraine's military size and also possible territorial concessions, many in Kiev view those as unacceptable. What pressure is Kiev under or willing to accept if there are any compromises?
Actually, if we are talking about compromises, I think that we are ready to freeze the front line. Before that, Ukraine said that we are not ready to frozening the current front line, but now we say, okay, we're ready to recognize it. We're ready to start talks about the end of this war from the position where we are. We are not saying that Russia should return to us our lands, but as I said before, we don't want to give a Ukrainian land to Russia. So that's the compromise already. Okay. Then about the compensation, so we will see.
Okay. Professor Ligoriev, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow next week. What are your expectations?
Well, the expectations are very, very simple to be defined. And I think that Witkoff will try to ensure Russia that Trump is willing to continue on the negotiation that was restored a few days ago, that the framework will stay the one that was agreed, and also the political timeline and the pathway will be the one set up in Alaska. Witkoff has this, let me say, role rather than define, let me say, details of the agreement. The details of the agreement are defined by other people, diplomats, and let me say, other key actors in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Us, the idea of European reassurance force was raised by Zelensky as he addressed the coalition of the willing. Where do European states stand on this point?
Of course, for Europe, it's a big test whether Europe is ready to organize its forces, because every time we hear a statement only after the end of the war, only if the war will stop. But now we don't see a clear end of this war. I hear what Donald Trump said, but let's be frank, Donald Trump said about the fast end of this war practically from the beginning, even before the beginning of his presidency. He said about 24 hours. And the war will over. Now we have, actually, it will be one year anniversary of Donald Trump in office on the 20th of January, and the war will go on, and war will be even after the 20th of January. But as for Europe, of course, we understand that the United States of America makes some pressure on Europeans. Because they said that, guys, you should think more about security of Ukraine. You should more about guarantee for Ukraine, because Ukraine is a Europe. Ukraine don't want to be the next state of the United States of America. Ukraine want to be next country in the European Union. Mm-hmm. That's why, of course, it will be pressure on European Union. Whether the European Union is ready, I'm not sure. Nevertheless, the European Union countries, at least those who are bordering with Russia, like the Baltic countries or Poland, they understand that they're next one after Ukraine, that the war will not over in Ukraine. That's why I think that they will motivate their colleagues on European Union to think more about sending their troops in different forms, even not in form closer to the front line. It could be their forces at least Ukrainian borders with Belarus and Moldova, but nevertheless some steps should be made. And I think that this push from Trump can influence on European countries to do that in the nearest vicinity. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Ligorio, reports suggest that the original U.S. plan demanded Ukraine cede territory and downsize its army, though these terms may have been softened. Would Russia view this as an option, the 28-point plan with fewer explicit demands, as satisfactory, or would it insist on stronger guarantees?
Well, I think that about territorial concession, Russia may be flexible on something. Maybe flexible on some part of the region that are not completely controlled, but this is out of the question about Lugansk and Donetsk, because this is fundamental for Russia, is out of the question. Otherwise, I think that a peace deal will not be achieved. Russia will continue to fight, to conquer, especially now that logistically Russia is stronger in that region. Yeah, we are talking about region as Zaporizhia, Kherson. Yeah, so I think that few territorial concessions can be done over there. About the let me say downgrading or even the demilitarization of de facto demilitarization of Kiev, with cutting 50% of the army. Here we can, I think that US can play with a specific guarantee and with a third actor. Yeah. So we don't need only US, because we know that whatever Trump may say can change mind tomorrow. Russia is very aware of that. So I think that a third actor will need to enter in this. China may be one, but even other actors for like Arab country, the country of the Gulf can be a good, let me say, actor to provide a certain guarantee. We know that, for example, in these days, all the negotiation and details are going in Abu Dhabi, and we know the good relationship that Russia has with the Emirates. So we have to consider also this. But we need big actors that would bear this this burden, yeah, this political and geopolitical burden. Okay. I don't think that other concession can be done in this. Negotiated in this stance.
Mr. Uz, reports say that U.S. and Ukrainian delegations now agree broadly on a 28-point revised framework. What internal debates and divisions exist in Kiev over accepting such a framework?
Of course, when we see this 28 items plan or 28 points plan, we said that probably it's illegal one from the view of UN Charter and from the international law. So we are discussing illegal thing, which is called peace plan. And Ukraine says that let's return it to something that will be correspondent with international law. That's why the talks that took place in Geneva led to the fact that this 28 points was decreased to 19 points. So, or items, everyone calls it as he wants. And now the main question, of course, it's territorial questions about the recognition by the annexed territories by US or some other partners, because Ukraine said that we are not ready to that and we are not signed by the deals that it will do that. Then about the total amnesty, we are not ready for that. As I said, too many crimes committed. And I think that will be discussed. As for NATO membership, probably it so will be discussed, because you know that there is term sovereignty of the country. And when country is limited in determining what army they will have, or whether they could be in NATO or not, could not be in NATO. Of course, it's a controversial moment. Probably Ukraine can find some form about NATO, but you know, when we are talking about guarantee, Ukraine have a bad experience. We have Budapest Memorandum, guarantee to Ukraine that no one attacks us. And Russia was the guarantor that, according to Budapest Memorandum, that Ukrainian territorial integrity will be preserved, and Russia violated that.
Yes.
The United States of America in 2014 under Barack Obama didn't help to us, but they in this memorandum they said that we'll do that. That's why now when we hear about some guarantees, we always said, guys, we have guarantees, and it didn't help us. And if even someone said about NATO, let's remind that in June, Donald Trump said that he's not sure whether the US will do something according to Article number 5 of NATO. So it means that even that is not guaranteed. That's why the only guarantee that we have is our army. And that's why we think that our partners, if they want to guarantee our security, should give more weapons to our army and should make it stronger. That's the best guarantee that we can receive.
I understand that the NATO issue is a contentious issue. It's one of the reasons why the war took place in the first place. So this remains to be seen. Professor Ligorio, Russia appears to increasingly brush off the imminence of a peace deal, as Deputy Foreign Minister says that Moscow isn't ready to publicly discuss the Trump administration's plan for Ukraine, while Trump says that the United States will stay close to the deal. Also, Dmitry Peskov described it, saying that a peace deal with Ukraine is within reach as premature. How do you read these contradicting messages?
They're not contradicting. Let's assume that Russia is a very complicated country, even politically. Yeah. So, and we know that always diplomats and presidential administration, they are trying to play good policemen and bad policemen. So read it from this perspective, first of all. Second, Russia is trying to keep a low profile in this. Because if you remember, few months ago, with Trump already showing a victory of the peace agreement, is already nearly 1 year that Trump is shouting to the world that the war will be done in 24 hours, in 100 days, and we are nearly 1 year. Russia want to keep a lower profile, not to be accused that will revert the table, yeah, and will be guilty for this, let me say, missing another time the peace agreement. So it's very logical from the Russian perspective that we keep a low profile, we don't discuss in details openly with the public and with the media our position. We say, we have an agreement, a base agreement on 28 points. Now the ball goes to the American field to convince Ukraine, to convince Zelensky, and then we will set up, let me say, a broader memorandum in order to guarantee the accomplishment of this agreement. This is very logic from Russian perspective. Of course, Western, they read maliciously this. I understand as analyst why and the reason behind that. But as analyst also and deep knower of Russia and Russian political system, I said that this is very logic from the Russian perspective to keep a lower profile.
Mr. Zelensky emphasized that further talks should include European allies. How strong is Ukraine's preference or demand for multilateral guarantees rather than bilateral US-Russia arrangements? And why?
You know, Hala, of course, for Ukraine, it's important to see Europe in this table. Because, as I said before, Ukraine wants to be in the European Union, and Ukraine in future will be a part of the European Union. That's why, of course, we need engagement of the European Union, because interest of Ukraine will be equal to the interest of the European Union. We understand that now European Union is not ready to substitute US or to be a plan. Nevertheless, when in this initial peace plan was a question that the frozen Russian money will be directed 100 billion in Ukraine, that in investment fund, we said that, excuse me, this money is located now in Europe. Not all of them, but majority of them, but vast majority of them. And of course, Europe should determine what to do with that, because even this peace plan practically make a dot on the ideas of so-called reparational credit. Now, the European Union discussed that option to give money to Ukraine, and it's 140 billion euros that Ukraine should receive in as said, due to the frozen Russian money that will be like a loan. For this money lie in European, first of all, Belgium structures, Euroclear. But now, of course, for Ukraine, it's for psychologically important to have Europe on the table. And really, we see that Donald Trump, when he talked with Ukraine, he pressed on Ukraine. When he talked with Ukraine plus European Union, of course, for him harder to press on Ukraine because he understands that it's a pressure on the European Union. And European Union, of course, is a serious player. And even with the attempt of Trump press on the European Union, like he did at the beginning of his presidency, with the statement about the Greenland, I think that he understands that for stability of his economy and for his future pressure upon opponents of US, for him better to have the Europe as ally but not as an opponent. And knowing, of course, this dialogue between Ukraine plus EU will be more serious than dialogue between Ukraine and US if Ukraine will be.
I get your point. Professor Ligorio, European leaders have criticized the U.S. plan as favoring Russia and demanded that their inclusion be there in the talks. Does Russia see Europe's push as interference, and how might Moscow respond if European influence increases in the final agreement?
Yes, of course, Russia sees this as an interference, and I understand also my fellow European leaders that they want to be part of the agreement, but Russia doesn't want to talk to Europe because Russia is aware that what's happened with the previous agreement. Yeah, so during the Merkel administration, Sarkozy, and even the others. So Russia doesn't trust European anymore because they know that with the Minsk agreement, everything was fed down, and Russia wants to speak with the key player. Russia knows that Europe has deep problem, political, economical, and social problems. So they want to, let me say, to reshift the world order. And we know that with the Alaska Agreement, a new world order has been set up, at least the main and the first pillars for that. And in this new scenario, in this new global scenario, Europe is not part of that. But of course, from a European perspective, it's like that you are the bride. Let me use this for your audience. It's like that you are the main founder of a wedding, and you are not invited to the wedding. So it means that you pay for the bride gift, but you're not invited to the wedding.
I get your point. And I'd like to thank you so much. That was Mr. Vincent Ligorio, head of the geopolitical department at Analytica for Intelligence think tank, and also Mr. Ivan Us, advisor at Ukraine National Center. Thank you both gentlemen for your valuable insights. And this brings us to the end of today's episode for In Depth. I'm Hela Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. More updates will come your way here on Qnews.